Good, and I'll start recording this guy. And, oops, the same one. Let me delete everything inside of here. Great. And essentially let's get this fixed up first. For your quiz one here, click on these slides. I put together a few slides for us to work with. Go ahead and make this. Can I full screen this one? Okay, I'll do it this way. So I picked a few slides that we can work with. And the quiz one format is going to be a mixture of multiple choice and true and false. So you can consider this multiple choice as a scenario where you check if something is true there. So out of the 4, it might be 3 are incorrect. So 3 of them are not true and 1 of them is, so pick the right one. Or it might be the inverse where you're supposed to pick the one that doesn't belong in there. So there's a few scenarios I'll point out when we're going through this that's good to remember for the quiz. And then the true and false ones are pretty straightforward. The true and false is essentially like, one of them would be like, you use the title tag to make a link. And it's like, no, we use the A tag to make a link. So something like that, which is a bit more rudimentary, but those are kind of the questions you'll get. There'll be no coding, there'll be no fill in the blank or anything like that, just multiple choice and true and false. There's no multi-select either, it's just those 2 forms, okay? So very basically, you have your elements, all right, I need to make it a bit harder than Felipe. So basic elements here. I just put out some that are good to remember. The title specifies the title of the web page we're using. The P tag, which is again just paragraphs of text that we have, and then the A tag, which is against what we use for linking. So again, the special thing about the elements and everything is that if I put a title inside of my code, what it does for me is that when I open up my code, my web page, you'll see up here it says hello world, and that's what the title tag does essentially for me. Again, a P tag, some text like so, and the P tag of course is just basic text that we see inside of our code. Nice. And then the A tag, we don't have any URLs right now, but whenever I add an A tag, we'll see that if I don't provide that special attribute, it's just a piece of text. But what makes the A tag a bit more unique is a href, and I could say something like, let me go ahead and make an ID of my ID down here. And the ID here will be called my ID. Essentially, I can jump to it now, okay? And you'll see up here that it automatically jumps in my URL to that anchor that's there. So those are some tags. Remember, hi Dan Athos, welcome. What we're doing right now is going through the quiz 1 review slides. So if you on the Moodle page, they're there, but you could just watch them too. And the tags, I feel everyone's pretty comfortable with the tags based on how I've seen folks coding and everything. You've been exposed to a lot of them. I'm more than okay though, because when you go into freelance work or if you're ever doing anything, don't be afraid to go ahead and if you're not familiar with a certain tag, let's just say that for some reason I forgot how the body tag works inside of HTML. Okay, I can do body HTML tag like so. And then we can see here I get information about it, definition and usage. So feel free to leverage that just to get familiar with it, because there's so many attributes out there that it's hard to remember everything that goes on, and we can go from there. Okay, so after you go through elements, you get to this concept of attributes. And attributes are things that are applied to elements and specify specific styles of functionality. Now, from the HTML5 standard, I'll read this off for us just because it's easier that way. So attributes are placed inside the start tag and consist of a name and a value separated by an equal sign. Okay, so what does this actually mean like in code? Again, this is my attribute called href. It's placed inside after my start tag, and it's separated by an equal sign, and I have my ID there. And now we can see here the attribute value can remain unquoted if it doesn't contain spaces or any of these symbols here. Okay, so what does this mean? Let's go ahead and delete this. If I save this code now, I deleted my quotations. We'll see here my code actually still runs perfectly fine. Okay. And if I delete the quotes from up here, as well, we'll see that it's still working just fine. An issue arises if I put a space anywhere, like here, or my ID space. Now that's an issue. So as long as you're not using any of these characteristics, you can leave these unquoted. So that's actually a scenario where you can leave them unquoted. Should you leave them unquoted? No, you probably shouldn't, because that's that's a good strategy to just get familiar with it. And again, it's just easier reading for other users, okay? Now, the other thing with attributes is that there's going to be specific scenarios with attributes. So for instance, autoplay is an attribute we saw earlier today. And if I go ahead and I type out autoplay here, you'll see that it actually doesn't fill in my autoplay. I have auto capitalized, but I don't have autoplay. This is because some attributes are specific to certain elements. So only a video will have an autoplay, or an audio will have an autoplay attribute. But there's also global attributes. ID is a global attribute because every single element can have an ID in HTML. Like even my body can have an ID, and even my head. So remember that they're global attributes and then specific attributes to elements. Okay, cool. Now, one little cool thing about attributes is there's a specific scenario in the quiz I kind of want to focus on. Is this border attribute. And border is this unique scenario. We haven't done with it too much. But I want to showcase this little idea. I don't have it too much in the strings there, or excuse me, in the slides. But there's a little thing called shorthand for your border, and there's other things that have shorthand as well. And shorthand properties are a part of CSS. And what this means is that by shorthand, you don't need to repeat the specific attributes during CSS. So some attributes have shorthand scenarios that we'll look at, but we'll come back to that when we look at CSS. But for the time being, if you want to make a note of the term shorthand in your notes somewhere, or just in your head, that'll be good to come back to later. Okay? Cool.
A quick question. Is this being recorded?
Yeah, this is all recorded. So I'll post that link underneath the recording slides as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. So we also have these HTML entities and special elements, and these are unique guys that we see in our code some places. Special elements, for instance, if we take a look back at our code, if I have my p tag and I put the element strong around something, like the someone screaming hello at me, like so, we'll see if I click on it, I get a bold hello right there, okay? Now, there's some little guys here inside of this list that I'll recommend you can reference during your quiz. These entities are all laid out here. There's actually a bunch of them, so I don't require you to remember all of them. Copyright's a good one. Registered trademark, you'll see those on pages some places. So those are all entities that exist inside of HTML. One more thing here is if you take a look at the... let me see here. Let me do an entity over here between the text. You can actually go ahead and create a built-in quote. So usually you might do something where you put quotes around the text itself. But in some scenarios, if you just want to kind of be a bit fancier or stick out from the crowd, you can create an entity by doing something with let me do QUOT. Let me do something like this, and I put a semicolon after it, and you'll notice that this becomes blue. So if I put in this ampersand and QUOT, you'll see in here that what that actually translates to is a double quote, okay? So if I spam this in my code in places, you'll see I surround it with quotes. So these are what we like to consider entities in HTML. This is an entity, and I don't really surround it with my quotes here. You'll see that this will actually give me a weird error. It will actually print them out. So entities only exist by themselves with the ampersand. An ampersand is a way to tell your code that there's an entity. Now, what are some other entities that you might have seen? If you did some programming, you might have seen this one, NBSP. That means non-breaking space. And that just puts in a space for us. But, you know, why would you type that out when you can just... you'd want to do that in this scenario because you can't just spam spaces in there. but it's the similar scenario, okay? So those are what entities are, and I also have special elements in here, so strong and underline. Those are all ones to kind of remember, okay? Cool. Any questions so far with elements or attributes or these entities?
All entities comes with this symbol on the front. All of them.
Excellent question. Yeah, all entities have this ampersand in front of them, the and symbol. So shift 7, you're going to need to put that in there because what that means is that's HTML's trademark entity name. So it says your code reads the and symbol, and it's like, okay, I'm going to wait to see what's written after it to write it out. You can also
how's
use
the symbol name?
Oh, sorry. What was it?
How's the symbol name?
It's called an ampersand, and it's
Okay.
shift 7. So if you type in shift 7 on your keyboard, you get that and symbol. It's just a fancy way of and. You can also use the number. So if I do and number 60 with a semicolon after it, you'll notice this guy gets blue. And if I run this guy one more time, we'll see I get a less than symbol for it. A very complicated way to make an easy thing harder, but it's good to know in case you read older code. Cool. All right, so now we're on to our best friend, the CSS. So some of us, I know, I've been dealing with this quite a bit. So CSS is our cascading style sheets. And general idea, I just want to remind us of inheritance and the keyword cascade. If you have a child that inherits the CSS properties of its parent, then it applies those properties to the child unless the child overwrites it. And this is where the external concept applies. So if I have a child of a div, and I'm applying everything to the div, again, if I have two divs in here, and inside of my style, let's see here, what's a good one? Let me make the height of each div 10 pixels. Background color, like golden red yellow. It's me in here. Okay. Oh, that's not the class. Let me just make each div like this. Okay. We'll notice that I have the div set up there for me, right? Now, what happens here, again, with CSS is that we can do stuff that's a bit more cascading. So I can say div. See if this guy works for us. Make this guy like this color. Okay. We'll notice now that because I'm not using classes or anything, it's a bit more convoluted, but I'm overwriting the div here. So I'm able to overwrite my my scenario here because I'm changing the background color. It's very welcome. And I'm able to kind of get through the inheritance of that, okay? Cool. So in general as well, so external is what we've already dealt with chapter 5, or chapter 3, sorry, with Lawrence microgrid.css. And the quickest way to remember how we link to a style sheet, again, is this code up here. Link, relationship, style sheet, and the source of my style sheet. So again, let's actually do this pretty quickly. If I go ahead and make a new text document, my quiz one, let me say quiz one styles. Let's call it that way.
Wait, because before you continue, you said that the parenting system there, the parent-child system, it goes from the highest priority is the line, right?
Yep, exactly. So inline is going to get the most priority. When this is going to be explained a bit better with an example of IDs and classes, because overriding the built-in elements can get a bit tricky. So let me make the style sheet, and I'll show you how the priority works for us here. So let's say let's go ahead and do. Let me save this as txt file. So I'm going to change this from all files and going to change this to .css time being. Great. And you'll notice I get a pound symbol on my home desktop there. So now I have these two guys. That guy. Save. Okay. And what I can say now is let me go ahead and just apply this style of 100 pixels and background color to all my divs that are inside of my quiz 1 practice. Okay. Let me use a paragraph for the time being. I think that will be easier to see. Okay. All right. Now we'll notice here that my styling isn't being applied here because I'm forgetting to link my style sheet. So your external style sheet is always going to be inside the top. Right underneath your head is usually where you want to put it. And you're going to use this word called link to create this. And this allows me to create a relationship inside of my code. The relationship is going to be a style sheet. And the source of this guy is going to be where I have him located. Usually in the same directory. Might be somewhere else though. But for instance, my HTML file is on my desktop. My quiz, my CSS file is on my desktop as well. So now I'm linking the two of them there. Okay. So now,
what other relationships are attached related to link?
Link. Oh, good card. So we saw a few of them before. I wonder if it pops it up for us. One of them is I forgot the proper term, but the other one is shoot. What is it? There's one we saw last on Monday that talked about other URL files. So essentially, what was the other one we had? So we had style. What was it? Oh, okay. No follow was the other one that we saw, and external. So a few of these other ones, you don't need to really know them for the test or anything. But next, for instance, is that if you have a HTML file and it's the next one that you're going through a file, if you're going through a bunch of files, like you have links to them, you can use this relationship of next, and that will keep track of them for you as well. There's a few of them here. I'll put them in the chat for us. But the biggest one you're going to be dealing with is that style sheet relationship. Cool.
Okay.
Nice. All right, so let me see here. This guy's not. Let me go ahead and add another P in here. Oh, is this guy not doing this? Oops. So we can shift to the, anyway, this is our kind of style sheets with these IDs. Let me go ahead and let's get rid of this reference real quick. I think maybe these guys might be breaking some of my code. Some text. Okay, and what I could say here now is with these style sheets, I'll kind of showcase this to us. I'm going to apply an ID here. I'm going to call it paragraph 1. Call it testing. And as soon as I have an ID inside of my style sheet, I can reference this ID with my pound symbol. I believe it was called paragraph 1 is what I called it. And what I'll try to do here is just copy this guy over again. And it looks like this guy's not working for me here. Should be working for us. That one's not working. In general, once I have this applied to my style sheet, that's usually how I can get it working in. So after I go ahead and I make my style sheet over here, I can go into my style sheet here as well. And I can also do inline styling. So I'm going to say something like paragraph 1. And let me say something like size, or they called size, font size. Let's do extra large one. Okay, so now I applied this guy to be much larger than he is here. And again, the general flow is that if this guy's written here and this one is given here, the attributes displayed here are overwritten by the inline. And of course, at the end of the day, once it's set up correctly, the attributes that are written by the overwritten by the single inline guy that's inside of here, we'll override it as well. Okay, so that's usually how the flow goes. This guy's the outermost level. This guy is the second level. And then this guy's style is your final level. And that's what cascade means. So it goes from external, internal, inline. That's kind of what you'll have to remember, okay? That's why we have the cascade idea for our code there. Cool. And then inline again is written right in line of it. Internal is written in the style area. Cool. So we can use some CSS selectors as well. CSS automatically knows the basic elements of HTML. So if you're just overriding a body element like body, you could just state the name of it. Gonna put this as light gray. Okay, so now my entire body's light gray. I overwrote that. The second selector you can use is classes, where if you want to apply a certain style to multiple things, the way that you make a class is by saying class is equal to, and then let's just say it's called my par class, like so. Now, how do I get my style to after reference a class? I'm going to use a dot, and then I'm going to say my class name. Let's say background color of these guys is yellow. Okay, so now I have a yellow background color for that one. And then how do I get the ID? We already saw the ID. The ID is this background color. And the cool thing, again, with how this stuff works is that I can apply the yellow background to each of these, but based on my cascading, how I'm going down, if my paragraph 1's background color gets reset, like so, say blue-violet, we'll see that it gets updated to that one. Now for the scenario where this guy's actually written first, looks like it's still working with it. So what's happening is that my class is defined first and then my ID. So up here, it doesn't matter how I define them. You can put them anywhere you'd like. But down here, if I put my ID is equal to paragraph 1, and then I put my class, you'll see that down here too, it doesn't swap it. And the general flow of it, despite what we might see here, is that I have these IDs take this kind of precedence over our classes, right? So again, this kind of follows the specifics of your external, internal inline. Your HTML element is going to be the most broad one. That's going to be applied right away. Classes are kind of that middle guy, which a lot of them are dealt with. And then IDs are going to have the most priority, where it's like, I have this one. Again, the way that we reference, I'll need to update this in my Google Slides. This one down here, sorry everyone, the way that you reference an ID, again, is not by this dot, it's by this pound sign. So pound sign ID is how we reference it. Let me fix that on my slides super quick. Sorry about that. Nice. Okay. Let's clear these guys. Cool. Now, the selectors that we have here, there's a few bits of information that I just want to showcase. If I want to target all elements with specific classes, you can describe the element name and then the class name. And then if you want to target all elements with a specific ID, you can target the element name.id name. Okay. So let's try to see if this actually works for us too. So let's just say I have my paragraph 1 ID and then my par class class. Let's make a few more of these guys here. Okay. Nice. So again, I might have a few different paragraphs without this class. What I could say here now is that if I say P, and then let me say dot, my par class, let's say font size, extra large. This will pretty much tell our code to say, hey, get every P element that belongs to the class of my par class and apply this style here. Okay. P pound sign, let's say par 1. Let's see if this guy works for us. So if I do P of par 1 and I font size extra small. I think, is that smallest? Do. Oh, that was not working. So again, with these guys here, we'll see that I'm getting PID is equal to par1 down here. So this is essentially telling me my selector is specifying get every P instance where I have the ID of paragraph 1. Let me see why my... Oh, there we go, my background color. Sometimes the fonts can be weird sometimes, not sure why. Cool. So now I'm getting every paragraph that has the ID of paragraph 1, okay? So that's the multi-selectors that you could use. And they're useful if you're dealing with a very intense HTML file. Now, for more information on selectors, I provided a link inside of your code there. And you can see here, this kind of goes ahead and you can take a look at this. If there's an asterisk, it matches any element. If there's just a single letter E, it says matches any E element. And there's more things down here that are interesting to look at too. So again, this is useful during the quiz if you want to take a look at it, just to double check.
I saw that there was a my ID thing. Well, is it my ID just an example, or it has to be my ID?
Oh, that's just an example. ID and class names are whatever you want them to be. So when you're getting quizzed,
go on the other page on the Google Chrome.
This one?
On the bottom of this chart, you see E my ID.
Yep. So
is it just a coincidence?
Yeah. So matches any E element with ID equal to my ID. If this said my ID 1, what it would do, my ID 12, it would match any E element with an ID equal to my ID 12. That's all that is. My ID is just a placeholder name for it.
Okay.
Cool. And again, you'll find in HTML, majority of the time, it's up to you what the names you want to make them are. Very seldom do you have to be very specific about the naming, except if it's the elements, of course. Cool. Just throwing some more information here. So on one of the questions, I believe it asks you is, how would you style a certain thing in your, how would you style a table data? I think that's what it says. So as a reminder, there's specific attributes for tables. Table with the quotes there is table element. TH is your table head. TR is your table row. And TD is your table data. So again, table is the head honcho. This is my table. These guys up here are my table head. In some scenarios, they might also be over here. Table row tells me to add a new row into my table. And table data is what I actually fill in. Okay, so all these can be styled differently and uniquely based on what element you're picking.
Can you explain one more time just this part of the table?
Sure.
When you draw?
Yep. This guy down here in the middle, like where I'm drawing, that's the table data.
Okay.
You know what? Let me...
It's basically the data that go inside the table row.
Exactly, yeah. And let me do it this way. That's our table at the very outset of it. It might not even, like, this example might not be the best because it technically doesn't draw anything. But we'll just go with this guy. This is where my table head is. My table rows are going to always be underneath my head or to the right of my head based on how you make it. And now finally, my table data will be what I use to fill in the data down there. Okay, it's kind of our layout of a table. So if you're asked, how do you style the background of a table data element, you're going to say TD. So I want to style the TD. You might be asked to style 2 or 3 things. TD, TR, TH, right? Remember, if you put multiple selectors after another, that's how you can select multiple of them. Okay.
And you told us a way on previous classes to do a title on the top of the table.
Oh,
right?
Great, right? And that little guy there, that one is called caption. Chef, I probably should have added that. Sorry. So
Captions
I don't
go
know
all
if
the top of the table, right?
Yep. So caption will always go up here, centered at the top of the table. Great question there. So caption is up here. That's usually what you use for your title. Okay. Cool. So if you want to screenshot that, you can. The recording's here too, though. So Let me watch that one. This guy. Nice. Cool. And so unfortunately, there's a few questions that like are very specific and like outside of coding realm. And I just kind of wanted to provide more information about general ideas of HTML without giving the answer away. So for general conventions and constructs in HTML, as we already know, for every container element that's not void, remember void only has a start tag. If you're containing something, you need a start tag and an end tag. If you don't have that, you're going to have issues. Your code will run, which is an issue, but again, you want them. Usually use lowercase, not usually, always use lowercase for all tag names. You can use camel case. If some of us don't know what camel case is, it's kind of like the humps on a camel. So you start off lower like this. This is usually how camel case is described. So you start lower, make it capital. Usually, though, you always make the rest of it something like this. So why am I doing it this way? Well, let's just say that I'm doing a function, get data. The capital letter determines the start of the new word, but it's all composed into one. That's what that convention is there. For attribute value assignments, surround a value with quotes and omit spaces around the equal signs. What does this mean for number 3? Essentially, you always want to, despite my previous statements, don't really do this. Also, make sure that you don't make it empty like so, okay? This will run. Oh, I lied. So this space
will run, but you put a space.
I put a space there. This does run, as we see here. It auto puts it back for me. I can't do my example. But again, you want to, the best coding paradigm, best coding conventions, as we see here. This will run, my part class, and the class there. Cool. Always have proper formatting and spacing. Make sure you tab in elements that are children of outer elements. What I mean by that there, what that does too, definitely don't have stuff like this. It'll automatically fix it up. VS Code is really handy for this. But if you're using Notepad still, make sure that you don't fall into that trap. Okay. Cool. Now, the constructs are essentially what are like things a part of HTML, and we already know there's a ton, but video is one that we've seen. Audio is a construct in HTML, what you can construct with it. Navigation is a construct, so the nav menu and these linkings. Navigation menu is usually something that we see at the top. You're doing that in your capstone project part 3, but again, navigation up here is where you have your links. Up at the top, we have our headers and footers, iframes and centering. Those are all a part of constructs in HTML. And again, you can even look up even more online. Like so. See here, HTML constructs used with sample. Oh, that might not be a good, that's kind of like IBM one. But you can see here, there's a bunch of constructs that are inside of it. Cool. Now again, some more of this basic information too. www, we've seen this all the time. That means World Wide Web. If we're not familiar with that by now. W3C is a World Wide Web consortium. And that's just kind of a conference or a consortium that happens where a lot of information goes on. And then our URL is our Uniform Resource Locator. And the last thing that I want to remind is that doesn't just mean up here. We're really familiar with URLs being up here at the top. It also applies to this guy inside of here. This is a URL. And so is this. This is my Uniform Resource Locator URL up there, okay? Both of those are good. And the reason why we want to make sure that we know both are there is because of when we make the CSS file there.